My name is Ramona Gonczol, and I'm an associate professor in Romanian language at UCL, SEAS, School of Slavonic and East European Studies, and the co-founder and convener of the ProLang group that is organizing the event tonight. I'm also the academic coordinator for the online language evening class program that we offered at SEAS, where we offer 18 languages from the region. I'll just say a couple of words about ProLang. ProLang stands for Policy Research and Outreach in the field of language-based area studies, with particular focus on languages of Central, Eastern, Southeastern Europe, and the Baltic region that we cover through our degrees and evening classes. I'll say a few words about tonight's event. Tonight, we'll talk about the role of postcards during Socialist Romania and beyond. The event will examine postcards from Communist Romania from both a political and personal perspective. Based on oral interviews and documents from the Communist Party archives, Adelina Stefan's talk will discuss the role of postcards in tourism in Socialist Romania, while I will draw on my personal memories about postcards as a teenager living under communism. The event will show that while at the political level, postcards were intended to visually portray socialism as a modern and viable political regime, at the personal level, they help strengthen social and family networks against the backdrop of increased censorship. Adelina Stefan is a researcher at the University of Ostrava in the Czech Republic and a fellow at the New Europe College in Bucharest in Romania. She holds a PhD in history from the University of Pittsburgh and is the author of Vacationing in Dictatorships, International Tourism in Socialist Romania and Franco Spain, published by Cornell University Press in 2024. In 2026, the book was awarded the 8th Biennale Society of Romanian Studies Book Prize. Thank you, Adelina, for accepting this invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ramona, for inviting me and for professionally organizing this event. My presentation is actually somehow related to the book Ramona mentioned, Vacationing in Dictatorships. And last year, almost at the same time, I have presented this book at the UCL. This is when actually the conversation started with Ramona about organizing this follow-up event. My presentation postcards, entitled Postcards as Communist Insta in Socialist Romania, between official rhetoric and personal experiences, places postcards at the intersection between the political aspirations of a socialist regime in Romania to visually present communism as a viable and modern political system, and the use of postcards as a form of personal communication across the Iron Curtain between the 1960s and the 1980s. What is the context of this presentation? Against the backdrop, it is tourism, right? Against the backdrop of an increase in the number of foreign tourists visiting Romania, but also as more Romanians traveled both domestically and abroad, starting from the mid-1960s, postcards became a means of communication as tourists used them to send images and brief messages to friends and relatives in order to document their experiences. Hence, as postcards were documents that were officially produced, they were supposed to mirror the official perspective about Romania. Yet, for Romanian citizens, postcards worked as a form of virtual traveling, as receiving postcards meant seeing distant places that they maybe couldn't easily visit, or at times, because of postcards, they became interested in visiting.
Adelina, your PowerPoint is not moving along, just in case we're still on the first slide.
Yeah, okay. I'm still at the first.
Okay, sorry, I just thought
Yeah.
it stuck.
So practically, also, Socialist Romania was, the communist regime in Romania was repressive, especially in the 1950s, and postcards helped somehow. It was worked as an easy way to communicate for a range of people, including for political prisoners at times. So when images came from abroad, especially from the capitalist West, their meaning was even stronger, as most Romanians could not physically reach those places because going abroad remained a cumbersome undertaking. So the received postcards were put on display in the living room next to families' photos, becoming personal objects that conveyed something about people's identities and social networks. So the main questions I'm trying to answer in this presentation are how did the circulation of postcards promote tourism? What sort of images or imaginary they were supposed to convey? And last but not least, what was the meaning of received postcards for ordinary Romanians? In terms of structure, first I'm going to talk about the politics of postcards and tourism. And in the first part of the presentation, and in the second part of the presentation, I will discuss postcards as means of communication and as political tools. What was the relationship between postcards and tourism between roughly the late 1950s and 1989? So in 1959, a report of the Council of Ministers about materials for tourist propaganda, how publicity was called, noted that a significant progress has been made compared to previous materials in terms of selection and quality of images, but these were still rudimentary compared to similar materials in more developed tourist countries, and they don't fulfill the increasing demands of Romanian tourists either. So the main issues were the chosen topics and their graphic design. Practically, the postcards failed to depict important brand new buildings, such as the House of a Spark in Bucharest, which was built with the help of voluntary work in the 1950s. And the Because hydropower, which was a plant also been built in the 1950s, more precisely between 1950 and 1960, on the Because River in Eastern Carpathians. And the building of this plant involved significant changes to the environment, and practically it represented a sort of victory of manpower over nature. So practically both buildings carried an important symbolical meaning for the communist regime, despite the context in which they were built. Other aspects that were missing were the vineyards and orchards in the new collective farms, the statue of a Soviet soldier, but also images of the Danube Delta or of various historical monuments that were deemed important. Several cultural figures were also missing. One of them was Mihail Sadoveanu. Mihail Sadoveanu was a darling of the regime. He was an interwar writer. But he became very known during the communist period because of his political association with communism. So he was supposed to be somehow promoted, rewarded for this allegiance. And there were other images that were supposed to be present, but they weren't. The new highways or railway stations, or modernized highways and railway stations, as well as, because we're talking about tourists, hotels and restaurants. So instead of including this material and ideological accomplishments, some postcards literally reproduced an older fan from the History Museum of Bucharest, which was considered trivial, rather trivial, because it didn't represent anything for the regime. So from an official perspective, practically postcards were supposed to convey the accomplishments of a communist regime and the material changes that occurred in the first decade of communism. These were important to highlight for both potential foreign tourists, but also for Romanians in order to visualize the economic and political achievements of a regime. So for the communist regime, postcards and visuals worked as a form of legitimization, as they were meant to depict only the positive aspects of communist Romania, while less inviting images, such as poorly dressed people or rundown buildings, were not supposed to be included, although they were part of everyday reality. So an example of postcards is so on the left side of a screen, it is the example of the way in which a postcard should not have been should not have looked like. It is a landscape, a winter landscape from the Carpathians, but it could have been from anywhere, right? While on the right side of a screen, you can see a more a clearer image, let's put it like that, because it includes a building, it shows a building and a specific place. So it's a mountain chalet in the Carpathians, also in the Carpathians. And this was the kind of image that the communist propaganda preferred to show. So one that depicted material, objects and material artifacts, I would say, but not fans. So it was supposed to show somehow the existing infrastructure, right? So to make tourists understand that, well, Romania has a certain tourist infrastructure. Postcards became even more important once the Romanian communist regimes wished to develop international tourism with a capitalist West. And this occurred in the early 1960s after a meeting in Moscow in 1961 of tourist delegates from socialist countries, which stated that socialist countries could be less expensive and more attractive tourist destinations compared to other tourist regions in Europe. The general context of a Cold War also favored the development of West-East international tourism, as Nikita Khrushchev, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the USSR, wanted an economic competition with the West rather than a military one. This led to an economic opening of a socialist bloc, which meant first and foremost a transfer of technology, but also an easier border crossing experience for tourists. So another report of a Romanian Workers' Party, or so PCR's called PCR, so Romanian Communist Party from 1965. This time it was the Agitrop, so the Committee for Propaganda. The document is from 1963, and it analyzed the propaganda work of a National Office for Tourist Carpathians, so the same language somehow as the report from 1959, propaganda. And this document emphasized that in the last years, the anti-Carpathians promotional campaigns have improved in terms of chosen topics and presentation materials. The promotional campaigns were meant to popularize tourist objectives at home and abroad and to describe them to tourists in a suitable way, as well as to highlight the political regime's recent accomplishments. Quite importantly, the plan for promoting Romania as a tourist destination had to be pre-approved by the Ministry of Foreign Trade, which suggested that these materials were mostly geared at foreign tourists, especially Western visitors. And indeed, some of the materials were actually produced together with foreign partners, as the report mentioned. With regard to postcards, the report mentioned that 5.2 million postcards were printed in 1963, compared to the 1950s, where message became clearer, as you can see in this slide, as specific places, buildings, and monuments were shown. Besides the postcards showing the Carpathian Mountains, in 1963, there were several postcards that depicted the Romanian seaside. Mamaia, especially Mamaia, was, let's say, the jewelry of a Romanian seaside at that time, because a large construction project started there in the late 1950s, and in 1962 several hotels were already finished and ready to welcome tourists. So, and this was exactly the image that tourists would encounter in Mamaia. Practically at that time, probably these buildings were the most modern in Romania, with no exaggeration. So practically the postcards depicting Mamaia conveyed to, especially to Western tourists, the Romanian communist regime's aspiration to modernity. According to this postcard, modern buildings were the landmark of a tourist landscape on Romanian Black Sea coast. And this projection was, as I said, grounded in reality, as the hotel's design followed the architectural principles of modern modernist architects, such as Walter Gropius and Le Corbusier. The Arhitectura magazine, which was the most important journal of Romanian architects, published detailed articles about the work of Gropius and Le Corbusier in the attempt to familiarize the students of architecture with these new tendencies. So, besides postcards, other promotional materials were used. One of them was movies, such as One Day in Mamaia. So again, it was about Mamaia. Or Golden Holidays in Mamaia, but also cartoons by Ion Popescu Gopo, who was a very well-known visual artist and movie director. And the cartoons were somehow geared at the domestic public, so Romanians. The fact that they use so many materials that rely on images, so movies, cartoons, mirrors the importance of visual materials for tourist promotion in socialist Romania. And this promotion had a positive outcome in the sense that through these images, Romania became, let's say, a familiar space, a familiar image for tourists across the Iron Curtain, so tourists from Western Europe. In the mid to late 1960s, for Western tourists, Romania came to look like the hidden treasure of the East. In 1968, Auto Touring, a Belgian magazine, not only informed its readers about specific tours and prices in Romania, but also published a well-informed article about this country. And the article entitled Invitațiunea României presented the Romanians as the Romans of the East and reminded its Belgian readers that French culture was very influential in this country before the Second World War. Also, the article informed its readers that one can easily spark a conversation in French while strolling around Bucharest. Postcards were not just official representations, but they also worked as means of communication and as everyday political tools. What do I mean by that? Well, as political surveillance remained tight in communist Romania, postcards became a means of communication both among Romanians as well as between Romanians and foreigners, especially those coming from the West. Because postcards mostly meant an image and a short visible text, this was met with less scrutiny. Yet, as I said, when it came to images from abroad, especially those from the capitalist West, postcards became a political tool and a way to connect with the outside world for ordinary people. For instance, in 1966, a Romanian visitor to the United States sent a postcard to his relatives in Socialist Romania, wishing them warm regards from the beautiful but distant place she was visiting. Although the message was mundane and did not offer much information behind the regular greetings, the image depicted on the postcard conveyed much more about the Romanian tourist experience than the written words. While Lincoln Memorial in Washington was depicted on the postcard, the stamp showed the recently defunded John F. Kennedy. Ilana N., who was a translator of French in Bucharest, used to receive such postcards, but also she relied on postcards to communicate with her friends in France, Belgium, or Spain in the 1980s. And she said it was easier to send or receive postcards than letters. There was no point to intercept them as anybody could see the message. And usually it was something like, I'm coming on the X date and I will visit Y and Y places, or just usual greetings. The more conventional the message, the fewer chances to call for the authorities' attention. Sending a postcard involved a process of careful selection and many times the writing of a text that engaged the image shown on the postcard. Hence, alongside ideas and information, the images were also important. Moreover, each context personalized the postcard and conveyed a specific message. Ilana N. remembers how in 1981 she sent to a Belgian friend a postcard that harked back to the interwar period as it depicted the techno import building. This is the building, an Art Deco apartment building in the center of Bucharest. And somehow her message was clear. She wanted to show the diversity of urban landscape in Bucharest and elsewhere in the country behind the newly built communist blocks, as well as the cultural heritage of interwar period still in place in Bucharest despite the demolitions that were taking place at that time. So yet more important than the sent postcards, receiving postcards, especially when they were sent from capitalist countries, held an, I would say, almost subversive message. Ilana N. acknowledges that what was more important than the written message was the image shown on the postcards. We would put the postcard on display in the bookshelf or somewhere in the kitchen. For her, postcards worked as a constant reminder of an outside world, even if she could take trips abroad, mostly to socialist countries, and she was in touch with Western citizens because of her job. But for those Romanian citizens who could not travel, so the large majority, postcards displaying images from the West came to epitomize the West. Because of that, in Socialist Romania, postcards became commodities and worked as valuable objects, which spoke about one social status or personal networks. And this is one image. It's a postcard that Ilana N. received from a French friend, and it just shows the scene, but in Paris. But for her, it was some sort of important, important image that she used to somehow relate with Paris, with the idea of traveling to Paris, of seeing something that she might. It was difficult to see in reality, even for her as a translator of French. And yet, the process of receiving postcard from abroad or sending one was actually relatively thorny for Romanian citizens, as it was the case with any correspondence with Western countries. If one wanted to send mail abroad, sure, he had to go to a special office, which was just one usually in large cities or towns. And this office dealt with international correspondence. Receiving was easier, as one only needed to take the postal notification left by the mailman to the closest post office. Liliana, another interview of mine, who is an accountant in Câmpina, was an accountant in Câmpina, Prahova County, remembers waiting in line in order to get the mail she received from her cousin, Aurelia Cobescu, who was a painter who could travel abroad more freely. One of the postcards the cousin sent from Paris in 1972 described his itinerary in Europe, while the image shown was the Church of Sacré-Cœur, this one, and its gardens in Montmartre in Paris. So at the micro level, for Liliana and her family, sister and parents, these postcards reenacted their connection with the French culture. This was a familiar presence in their lives as they came of age before the communist regime took power, and their education included classes about French culture and language. And most of the images depicted on the postcards were all maybe well known to them from art history or travel books. But seeing them on a card sent by their cousin turned these otherwise abstract images into a familiar trope. Those distant places that their cousin visited became theirs through this sheer family affiliation, despite the fact that neither Liliana nor her sister or parents ever set foot in any West European country before or after 1989. When examining this phenomenon from a more political and global perspective, the postcards that Liliana or Ilana received helped connect capitalist Western Europe with socialist Eastern Europe, despite the Iron Curtain divide. So, in the long run, they did help preserve personal networks that went beyond the authority of a state and, most importantly, worked as a reminder of an outside world. For Romanians, postcards refreshed and personalized iconic images in the Western countries and helped them gaze at distant places. For Western citizens, images from Socialist Romania epitomized an exotic landscape and a possible tourist destination, especially in the 1980s when photos became so hard to take because of accusations of espionage. Postcards remained one of the ways of remembering vacation and of connecting with places where friends or even family lived. So, to conclude, practically the Romanian state used postcards to promote a neat image of socialist Romania that was supposed to mirror its material and ideological achievements. Yet, for ordinary people, the meanings were manifold, as postcards worked as a form of virtual traveling to distant places from Romania or from abroad. Against the backdrop of Cold War, postcards became another tool which bypassed the political scrutiny of a communist regime and enabled some sort of both formal and informal communication between socialist East and capitalist West. Besides facilitating a form of communication between, as I said, capitalist and socialist blocs, and establishing informal relations that went behind the Cold War division. Postcards ultimately helped to create a common visual culture. While for Romanian citizens who could not or did not have a means to travel to the West, postcards provided an up-to-date image of various cultural artifacts that they came to associate with a certain location in the West. For the citizens of capitalist countries, postcards from Socialist Romania worked as glimpses into the other world. Although they displayed officially approved images which conveyed modernism and a cultural heritage with ties to the European civilization, postcards did construe a certain imaginary about Romania and the West. This imaginary attracted tourists, and until the 1980s, few travel magazines could contradict it, despite Romania's location behind the Iron Curtain, as the communist country showed its interest to establish closer relations to the capitalist world. Well, thank you. And now I give the floor to Ramona to tell us a little bit more about her personal experience with postcards, and then maybe we'll have some reactions from the public as well.
Thank you so much, Adelina, for a very rich and fascinating presentation. So indeed, when we met a year ago, we initially planned to have a physical exhibition of my rather huge collection of postcards that I have in London, and probably Adelina would have brought a few hundreds as well. But life happened and we couldn't do it physically, so we didn't want to miss the moment completely. Maybe in the near future we'll try something in person. However, I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with postcards that have pervaded my whole life. And then I have selected a few postcards to show you from my collection that illustrate what Adelina presented. So just in very few words, I've been collecting postcards all my life, probably since I was 8 or so, I don't remember before then. And initially there were postcards that I liked. So I have a few examples here, anything like something that kids like, a town of cats, or pretty ones that you would get for Easter or for the New Year. Are they visible, Adelina? Is that okay?
Yeah, they are.
More or less, yeah. Or flowers, of course, because I was a girl, I'm female, and so on. So that's how it started, and then as I grew, my family, my friends, we used to send postcards to each other a lot from holidays, from wherever we went. Inside Romania, we obviously could not leave outside. And it was always a moment of happiness to find something in the post box. And as Adelina said, what was written on the back of the postcard wasn't some big philosophical letter, but simply conveying that these people were thinking of you. So very often it was like, I'm sending you the warmest thoughts and greetings and my love from wherever I am on holiday. And I would do the same with my parents. I actually have a personal one that I'm happy to share, written by me to my parents. So the postcard is from some mountains in Romania. And it says, well, this is my writing and signed. It's from 86, just to kind of specify that. Dear parents, I've arrived in the camp, like it was a kind of school camp with no issues. The weather is great. I feel great. Transport was good. We'll take a trip on Transfăgărășan, which is a famous road in Romania. Kisses, Ramona, So I think this is quite typical of what postcards used to say. Not a lot, but still, showing that you're thinking of these people. And I remember if I was on a holiday, I would have a long list of people I'd like to send postcards to. I'd go to the post office, try to choose the best looking ones or the ones I like the most. And it just, then you'd buy the stamps, so it was quite a kind of involved process, like committed, Then you obviously had to take them somewhere to post them and so on. And you just felt that you've done a good thing, if you want, sending your postcards from the holiday. I just made a couple of notes so I don't forget. Yeah, I mean, apart from postcards, I also collected paper napkins, and I'm sure because I see lots of friends in the audience, I'm sure that others did the same, especially if they were female. And later on, when I was a student, and it was after 89, I subscribed or signed up to a pen friends club, an international pen friends club. Their headquarters used to be in Dublin, I think. And then my collection of postcards exploded because I would have maybe 20, 30 pen friends that I would write all over the world. And what would I put in the envelope apart from a letter, of course? Postcards, from Romania. And I would get lots of postcards from abroad. I don't have these ones here in London. They're in Romania, Timișoara, but still. And then after that, I just fell in love with the idea of having lots of postcards. So I started to kind of hunt them in fairs, in markets, everywhere where I could. And my collection started to grow, significantly. Yeah, I still buy postcards when I go on holidays, even if I don't send them to anyone anymore, unfortunately. We've all kind of cut down on this idea of posting things to each other, unless we do electronic postcards, but then they're not bought in the shop, and it's different. And I buy them just because I think that maybe I can't take a photo like that, or I like collages where you have one postcard with 5 images from a place, or I simply fall in love with a postcard and I buy it as a souvenir. So yeah, I have many of those. Now, my son, when he was 7 or 8, so probably quite similar in age with like when I started collecting, I encourage him to also try to have a couple of pen friends, which he did, which we found through Facebook groups. So, a completely different story. And he started writing to a couple of people in foreign countries, one in the US and one in Malaysia. And of course, he also sent postcards from London, to his pen friends, So the kind of tradition continued in our family. So I think that's enough of me, but I'm very much looking forward to hearing from other people in the audience. But before we do that and take questions for Adelina, I'd like to show you a couple of postcards. So this is the House of Sparks that Adelina mentioned in Bucharest. If you look at this postcard, it's surreal, almost psychedelic, like no people, just
so finally it showed up on a postcard, right?
Exactly.
So
and that was probably considered,
and it's in black and white, as it seems.
Yes, it is black and white. Yeah, it is, and it's 50 from 57 when it says Romanian Popular Republic. Yeah. Okay, and then a few more from Bucharest, also in black and white with various official buildings. So this is a governmental building, and this is another governmental building in the middle. This is a famous exhibition of national economy that happened in 62, I think. And then just a couple of more photos from Bucharest with just normal residential areas, so to speak.
Yeah, of a new building blocks, which were very important to highlight.
Yeah, you could see, that there were not many cars on the road and not even that many people in a way. I guess these girls were kind of staged there. I don't know if they just happened to be there or not. And just a couple.
Yeah, certainly the buildings were, the main attraction. Yeah, because they, materialized. There were a material thing somehow, and this was the goal somehow to represent materiality.
Yeah, and the last two from Bucharest. So this one is, more of a bird's eye view, and then this one is very panoramic of a whole new residential area built, I guess.
Very modern buildings.
Very modern, yeah, brand new. Yeah, so that would be Bucharest. I do have postcards in colors from Bucharest as well, also mainly from before 89. I mean, these are the ones I selected for today, that is. And obviously, I will show a couple just so you see how the situation changes. So it's the same, one of the same buildings that I showed before, a governmental building. So obviously, it looks much better in color. And then let's see what else. And then a lake in Bucharest, as you explained, Adelina, that they wanted.
That was from Cismigiu.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think so. No, Herăstrău.
Oh, Herăstrău. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see what else.
Which is also a park that wasn't built during communism. It isn't from 1930s.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. I mean, it was just a natural landscape, one of the most important parks in Bucharest. So
yeah. I hope I'm not boring anyone, but I think it's this is the famous Hotel Intercontinental from Bucharest, but also the postcard is, well, actually it's probably early 90s if I look on the back of it. Not all of them have writing. And then a few older ones. This is Cismigiu, another famous park in Bucharest. And then the famous Arch of Triumph that replicates the one in Paris. This one would be from 74 or 70, I think 79. And then the last two from Bucharest, this beautiful one with the Museum of Romanian Peasant these days, but in the past it was Museum of Ethnography or something like that. But this fountain doesn't exist anymore, right? That used to be.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I was surprised, as well. And then a collage with Bucharest. So one is saying it's fascinating how the built environment transforms in the postcards, but somehow they retain the same air or atmosphere. Yeah. Wonderful. I mean, if you can still last, I have a few more, not a couple more. Just a couple from my city, Timișoara, also all before 89 in color. I do have black and whites, but I thought that I showed you enough black and whites. Just to illustrate what you said, Adelina, about trying to make them more localized in a way, or
identifiable.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's the theater that any Romanian, I think, would recognize, and kind of more bird's-eye view thing. Okay. Let's see. I think I've gone through the big bulk. So
somehow from your experience, I would say that postcards were indeed connected to tourism. So they like your own experience somehow is you used to send postcards when you were in a children camp, so you wanted to connect, so when you are far away from the family, right?
Yes.
So from this point of view, we can say, well, that regime was a bit successful, in making people using postcards, right? So official images that they promoted, right, as the correct ones about Romania. And it's an interesting mix somehow here between this official intention and the actual use of postcards, right? Because I'm not sure to what extent you actually paid attention to images. It was something that, you just probably as a child, you just liked, right? So it was something that called your attention. It was not necessarily something that, I don't know, the ideologues of a party would have thought that is important. So it's there are very, very some clashing perspectives here that somehow existed in Romania during communism.
Yeah. So I just
the more evidence of time and money for leisure. We have a.
Sorry, I think Juana wrote some more. So did they function as a status symbol? The more postcards, the more evidence of time and money for leisure. Oh, sorry, you're reading that. Or the more international connections, the more social capital among acquaintances.
Well, I don't know. The fact that someone was visiting certain places was already I don't know, building some capital, some cultural capital, right? And when it came to domestic tourism, I don't think the money was not necessarily an issue, because most tourists traveled either through the trade unions, they had
Yeah.
tickets through vouchers through trade unions, and that was inexpensive. Or if they had a car, they would just, go through the country on their own, and they were not necessarily things were affordable.
Yeah.
From the interviews that I have conducted, what stands up is that vacations were affordable, right? So they could afford to stay in a hotel or to eat in a restaurant. Of course, not a luxury restaurant. There were no luxury restaurants, in fact, but more,
Yeah.
accessible ones. Um, yeah, so it was not necessarily a status issue, I would say. No, it was about connecting. It was when someone from, I don't know, parents were away, they wanted to send a message to their children who maybe stayed with their grandparents, or when children were away, it was a form of, sending some news, a word that I'm okay.
Yeah. And I'm
Um,
thinking of you. Yeah.
it was also the fact that maybe it is difficult to imagine now, but phones were not that accessible either. So, and people could not talk much on the phone, right? So
Yes.
some maybe didn't have one at all. So postcards
Absolutely.
were much more at hand to say something. Oh, all right, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm here in this place. I, eat well. I'm, having a good time.
Yeah.
So they were just a form of communication, standard communication.
Yeah.
There is a book which looks at the history of postcards. And she compares, the author, Lydia Pite, is the name of the author. She compares the postcards with text messages, right? So read very short messages,
Yeah.
essential, with just very few words with essential meaning and message, and that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and she's talking about the US, so it's a different context. She's using this but I guess this also worked for a country like Romania during
Yeah.
communism.
I do have a few photos from um, resorts, like mountain resorts that we all used to go to in
Yeah.
communism, because they were offered, like this kind
Hmm.
of deals were offered through these syndicates and so on.
Yeah.
And I think I've done all of them or
And
most
school
of them.
camps, right? So children camps were also very popular.
Yeah, or it was also very popular to go to these natural resorts, with
Yeah.
special waters and treatments and so on. So one of the most known ones was Slanik, Moldova, in the mountains, very
Yeah.
beautiful. And then Bazna, another one.
Which is a not very well known resort, Basna. It's in Karaș-Severin.
Uh, I thought
No,
it was more,
southwestern part of the country anyway.
yeah, maybe. And then
Yeah,
Govora. I spent
yeah,
many
that's
holidays in Govora myself. And then one from the west just to Băile Herculane, which used to be a beautiful uh mountain
very
spa,
old.
which was
Yeah,
then kind of left to ruins, but now I think it's kind of slowly being
recovering, but
rebuilt.
not
Yeah.
much.
And when you talked about how they wanted to improve the quality of the postcards to attract more foreign tourists, and then obviously that there were all sorts of mentionings in famous tourist journals. Here's an example of a postcard from Romania, also with French writing and
Mhm.
quite good quality and beautiful colors and the whole thing.
Images are, yeah.
Yeah,
So communist churches archaeological
Yeah.
sites and
Castles as well. Yeah,
yeah.
1974. And just a couple more, and then we'll take questions. So I selected this one, which is from Mangalia, but not because of the image. The image is the same with many others, but because of how
Just a hotel.
this person, look how much they managed to fit
Yeah.
in. There were
A
people,
small
and I
letter,
had
a
friends
short
like that
letter.
who really use the space on the
Yeah.
postcards, including sideways and everywhere.
Yeah.
That was cute.
It was versatile somehow, so.
Yeah, and my very, very last batch, I won't bore you anymore, are some postcards indeed sent by Romanians from abroad who had the chance to travel to their friends. But all of them indeed, for instance, this one is from Paris, and all it says, it's, warmest greetings and kisses from the city of light, with love, X and Y. You'd think that, they would want to write more, but the reason why they didn't is of what you explained, that, they would be censored and so on. So it was just, a kind of pre-warning. We'll come back, we'll tell you more. But here's a little image. And then I have a few more, but I mean, we don't have to see them all. So one is from Potsdam, also greetings from Germany. Family X sends you. That's it.
Yeah, so basic communication, literally.
Yeah. You can see that it's extremely minimal.
But it shows a lot. So it shows that, those people were safe, first of all, were there, and they were enjoying the place, right? So
yeah. So one from Spain, and then interestingly one from Berlin, but the choice of postcard is interesting because it shows a spaghetti junction, like roads, which obviously for a communist country was very advanced and interesting.
Yeah.
And then I have a couple from Rome, very similar on the back, like just greetings and that's it, from Rome, and they're all from 75 and 76. And the very last one is from New York City, from 65, where 1, 2, 3, 4 people write on the postcard. I'll show you and translate you can see the different kinds of writing.
Yeah. And and a lot of text.
Yeah, because I think they met, like 3, 4 people who are living in the New York City met and were writing to a friend in Romania, and they all wanted to express their love and so on. So they all say, how happy they were that they were together and thinking of this friend in Romania and things like that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the little online exhibition ad hoc.
Yeah, very interesting. And I was actually thinking that you can maybe even trace some sort of history of
yes, of course,
place, and through postcards, if one is very careful, and has a rich collection as you have. I don't have, my collection is not that rich.
So shall we, if people brought a postcard themselves, it would be amazing to see it and hear the story, or just ask questions, just join in. If you put your hand up or anything you can do, I can let you speak, by the way. So I'll just... I don't think anyone is announcing their intention. If you just kind of type like, I want to speak or something, I will see it here in the chat. So Anna, would you like to talk a bit? So Chantel is asking, what's the oldest postcard you have? I mean, probably, I didn't actually think about it. I do have like a special place with very old postcards, beginning of last century or something. Yeah, that's something I should So I'll allow Anna to speak. Anna, you can speak if you unmute yourself. Anna?
Yeah, this observation is interesting. Like postcards just used as a reminder of places instead of million digital photos, right? So this also meant a careful selection of somehow of images and um, because there were fewer, right? So the technology wasn't that advanced, so people really had to choose just one thing, one thing. It was a thoughtful process, right? While now, when you are taking a lot of pictures, a lot of things, you just it's almost a routine. It doesn't involve so much thought, so much selection after all. It's I would say it's a more personalized gesture to send a postcard and to select a postcard than to take, I don't know, 100 pictures and post them on Facebook. Maybe. I don't know what you think, Ramona or others, if you feel that postcards have a certain materiality and a certain symbolical meaning that that is lost, maybe.
Yeah, so Carla, who's also my friend from Italy, she wants to speak. So Carla, please.
Okay, can you listen to me?
Yes,
yeah, we can hear you.
I have some problem with English because I prefer Romanian.
She's fluent in Romanian.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if the audience is speaking.
I mean, from what I can see, most people speak some Romanian, but I'm not sure of absolutely.
Okay, I'll try in English, but anyway.
I'll help you, yeah.
When I listened to you, I was looking in my library to find my oldest postcard from Romania. And so I got it.
Excellent.
It is from Timișoara. Unfortunately, there is no year written, but it's in, well, may I show you?
Yes, I think you can show it. We can't see you because it's a webinar. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Let me just see if I can do anything to...
I can make a picture, take the picture and send you to...
promote. I think if I do this, you'll be able to...
okay. And
do you have your camera on now, Carla? Is your camera on? You're also muted. Yeah,
yes,
here you are. We can see you, but you're muted. Just unmute yourself.
Sorry. Okay, well, now you can, it's okay, I think.
Yeah, perfect.
This is the postcard. Wait. A little bit. Maybe it's not focused yet. Can
I
you
think
see?
if you hold it closer to you, it's more visible than so close up. Closer to you.
Okay. Maybe
it's very blurry. Pretty blurred, but
I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. But
I think
yeah,
it's because of the light.
There's maybe. Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, now you can
if you hold it in that spot, we can just about see, the theater and the cathedral and everything. Yeah.
So this is Timișoara, as
where we met.
Yes.
Is it in colors?
Is it in colors? Yes. And there are the most famous monument, but it's interesting that there is also the Parcul Roselor. So the rose park.
Yeah, the park of roses.
Of roses. Okay, that is very, very nice, and it still exists. And so the best of Timișoara, I think it's not in the socialist from the socialist period.
It's post-socialist.
Post-socialist, yes. But it's interesting that beside it's written also in French. opera, l'opéra, cathédrale, la cathédrale.
Yes.
Maybe for
Yeah, the
Right.
explanations were in several foreign languages, in French, in English, German. Even during communism, it was like that. Show that they were, meant for Romanians, but also foreigners to understand what they were seeing, so.
And for me, it's interesting also how to feel, no? Because on the other side, you have destinatar, strada.
Yeah, so all the information, yeah.
Yes. And it's typical from socialism period because the toponomastica, the place, didn't change so
much.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
The name of a street. The name of a street
Not
did change.
no, I was not thinking about the name of the street, but how in Romania was the address? Strada, block.
Yeah, the same. It's the same format.
Okay, the format. Okay, the same format from that period.
Yeah.
Socialism period. So it remained maybe.
And do you collect postcards with Italy or
No,
many places?
no.
No? Okay. Well, you'll have to start doing that for me.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ruxandra, sorry to put you out on the spot. Would you like to talk? Have you collected postcards throughout your life or?
We also have another message from Juana.
Okay. Let's take the message first. Juana, would you like to talk? Because I can upgrade you, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that might make quicker work of it. It just felt that, throughout time, the perception of our own collection of postcards kind of had different phases. So my mom had a collection from when she was obviously younger, and she collected them, and she had international correspondence and pen pals. I sent postcards from camp, from wherever we were going, and I bought them just to keep them as place sakes and memorabilia from those places. But it felt like there was this big moment sometimes in the late 90s. I think about the same time when communications were kind of taken over by technology, and phones were, people were talking. Yeah,
mobile phones.
Yeah, I remember corresponding with friends up to like 2004, 2005, and then kind of phones took over, messaging, text messaging, and then phones. But the collection almost got thrown out then, because there was this moment where it felt passé, and like the architecture and the way the postcards looked, they just felt like out of place. And well, desuet, what's the English word for that? And afterwards, things kind of change, and they started to become this sort of memory tool. And they were like, this is, snapshots of things that were like this in my parents' youth. And we started returning to them, and they sparked memories for them, and they sparked conversations. So they took on that place. And I'm happy to say we still have the collection, though it's probably not in a very well kept condition, but I'll check on them. That's my cue to check on them.
Thank you so much.
So just a short remark. If it is to compare postcards with texting, with messaging, one advantage of postcards is that they remain, right? So as a material object, they still exist, and somehow maybe it's in the closet somewhere hidden, while text messages are lost, right? Because we change phones, we don't have enough with memory, right? So digital memory is limited, where it used to be limited. So somehow it's somehow the same discussion about what's best to have some sort of, I don't know, material archive or a digital, you know, archive or this digital communication, material versus digital communication, in a way, especially at a time when digital tools were not very, I mean, still analog somehow, but you know, communication was, technology was still not that advanced. Now maybe we can keep better track, but in the 2000s, the phones were still rudimentary, and messages disappeared, right? So they were lost in a way.
I mean, I still feel very happy if I get anything in writing these days on a piece of paper. So
yeah, it's a different way of communicating,
conveying, yeah.
of communication, because it has this materiality, and I think that's something that is unique for postcards, which somehow we should highlight, right? So that even, you know, it doesn't exist with Facebook. It's a more personalized message. It is to a certain person, a certain, I don't know, group of people, parents or grandparents, as opposed to just everybody.
Exactly.
You know, it feels more personal rather than general. And it involved, although there were just very few words written on a postcard, it was they had some meaning, you know, they had a special meaning, and you know, between the sender and the receiver, right? So it established a communication, a relationship.
Yeah, so Ruxandra saying postcards are long lasting in comparison to digital messages. I've noticed though that the generation of my children does less collecting of souvenirs or cards. They are used to communications that last a few seconds. They're happy to throw them away after a few days.
Exactly, yeah. So communication is lost somehow through text messages, or even, you know, through digital means, I would say, you know, because there's so much, right? It allows you nowadays to communicate so much, to say so much, and then you just delete it, you know, it doesn't exist. It's in the history of our devices. So somehow, you know, so that's, I don't know if it's
Yeah, no, absolutely.
yeah.
So was she I remember you work with visuals. Would you like to contribute or of course anyone else? I don't know. I'll give her the right to talk if she wants to.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I was just messaging you. I don't know how to unmute myself.
Well, you're fine now. Yeah. Do you want to turn the video on, or you're okay like that, as you wish?
I'm okay like that. I just
Okay.
got home.
Okay.
I
Thank you for accepting. Yeah.
apologize. I actually I joined quite late because I was teaching much later, and so I joined a bit later. But in terms of, yeah, I do work with the visual, and but more in terms of photographs, but then photographs that still exist. So I work with family archives, and so and I just found the conversation we're just having, and just in terms of the temporality of it, and how like the ephemeral things that we are
Yeah.
using, how we are dealing with things now, and like what is lost with that, you know, in not just tomorrow, but also in terms of historical, whereas like now we still have all these postcards. And I believe, Adelina, I did you write an article about postcards?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I've got that, and I found it fascinating in terms of postcards, and what they say, just in terms of the stories that they tell, and you know, similar to uh, analog photographs. But and I have actually since COVID because of the lack of access, I started collecting them. So whenever I'm in Romania, I go to antique shops and I do collect, like I buy random photo albums. Especially like in Cluj, there is this antique shop, and they've got like, it turned out that it was actually from a family that was really well known, and like an economist in Cluj. I forgot their name, the family's name, but like I've got like all of their photo albums now. So it's like a whole project in itself. But I'm always fascinated about what people throw away and how we've sort of, what is then of interest to us and how we can sort of tell different stories about that time. So yeah, I'm very, very interested in this talk and in this subject area. And but yeah, I've never collected um, postcards. I have, in terms of as part of the family, because we migrated, like my family, and then we wrote postcards back and forth, that sort of thing. So I kept, the ones my grandmother has sent me, or I sent her, that sort of thing. But that's more because of my grandmother rather than sort of, collecting them. But I know, again, the antique shops are full of them. So it's interesting how antique shops sort of keep them, just like old photographs, in terms of to sell them, but people throw them so easily out.
Yeah.
So it's just like I'm quite like that is in itself, so like that sort of tension, or that sort of relationship between what we throw out and what others deem,
Important.
important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For not personal reasons, because when we look at these postcards that do not belong to us, we have no personal relationship with them.
Absolutely. But it's still, we can tell stories, out of it, like in terms of
It's important
research, but
for other reasons.
Absolutely. And so that cultural history and, like throwing that out as well as keeping it, like, yeah, it's very interesting to think about it in that sense.
Roshi, I forgot where you teach. Was it University of
Brighton.
Bristol?
Brighton.
Brighton. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, very nice to see you here.
Yes, no, I was looking forward to it. And I'm teaching on Tuesdays now. So when I saw that this event was online, I was like, oh, hopefully I can make it from the start. But like, I wouldn't be able to come back to London in time for in-person event. Hopefully I'll teach on a different day again next semester.
Next year, yeah, try. Anthony,
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to say a few words. I mean, I have a feeling, I know that you send greeting cards, so maybe you do collect postcards or like postcards. I mean, it's not compulsory to talk about. I'm just asking you. He might not be at the computer.
Hi.
Hi. Wow.
Yeah, as a child, I used to collect postcards. Every time we went to visit, I was going to turn something off in the background. One moment. Every time we would go to visit a historic building or someone or we went on holiday, I would collect postcards, and I had scrapbooks with them in for many years. And it was probably only fairly recently, actually, I've stopped sort of buying cards. It was interesting, you were talking earlier about you still buy them, but actually don't send them. And it's only probably in the last 4 or 5 years I've actually stopped sending postcards. I think it was COVID. Before COVID, whenever we went somewhere, we would send at least 3 or 4 cards to family or friends. And I was thinking back actually to the postcards in Romania, because I remember going to Romania for the first time in 1980.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting, the sort of design of the cards. It was so different from what you would see in Western Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And quite limited
range frozen,
well.
A little bit frozen in time.
Yes. Yes, and it was quite a limited range of cards that you could find, the images. And I don't remember them being black and white, though. I can remember.
No, they were very in color.
Only
from the mid-60s onwards, they were only in colors.
Mm.
You're too young, Anthony.
Technology advanced. But with the postcards, one reason why people probably don't send postcards anymore is that also postal services are somehow declining. So they advanced to the postal offices, right, in the late 19th century,
Yes.
early 20th century. But now we see that a lot of post offices are closed down. It's a decline of written communication, of paper, of communication that involves paper.
Yes,
I
that's really
suppose.
interesting, actually. So the last time I went to Bucharest, it was about 6 or 7 years ago. We bought some postcards to send, and we wrote them. We had the stamps, but we couldn't find a postbox anywhere. And
Yeah.
but the friend that we were meeting up with for dinner on several evenings actually was able to find us, I think, the one postbox that seemed to exist in the area we're in. It was impossible to find one.
That's amazing. Do you still have that scrapbook with postcards?
No, I don't. It went a long time ago. I had about 3 or 4 of them. Yes.
Oh,
My childhood it's lost.
that's a shame. Thank you so much, Anthony. That was lovely. I mean, the only person I haven't called out is Jonathan, in case you want to say something.
Not really. I'm fascinated by it, and I've been particularly looking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. And I've been looking into. I'm working on a film script about Kostanesh in the 80s. So as you've been talking, I went on eBay to look for Kostanesh in the 80s postcards, and there are plenty. And they're very evocative. So I think it's a super interesting subject. I also remember when I was a kid at school, that was in the 1970s, my parents were living in the States and I was at school in England. And we used to communicate by postcards. And partly because I couldn't be bothered to write long messages. It was always easier to write a postcard than send a long message. But it was always, it was a great excitement when a postcard arrived. So they did definitely have a kind of, but that was just in England. That wasn't to do with communism. That was just postcards as a phenomena. I think a lot of what you're talking about is pretty universal.
Exactly. Yeah. So I described, how postcards were sent, received in a communist country, in an authoritarian regime, but the meanings actually could be quite general. People could actually have, this joy of receiving a postcard and of connecting with the image, regardless of a political regime. So
yeah, it's also actually a lot of your postcards around Sala Palatului in Bucharest. I'm off to Bucharest on Friday, and I think I'll take those images with me because I know it's changed a fair bit since then. But it's interesting to see how they wanted it to be perceived then versus how it's perceived now, and I think it's very interesting because it looked pretty good when it was first built.
yeah, the images were very clean.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were very carefully selected. I mean, there was a process. It shows somehow, these reports show that there was an interest in what to show, how to show, so and that the political side was involved in that. It wasn't just a random process.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the other picture you had was of Rom Expo as well as what's now Casa Presse, and these were buildings to be proud of. I think. They were the sort of showcase buildings of the regime, weren't they? So it's not surprising that they wanted to show them off.
Highlight them, show them.
Yeah.
So you have to go and try to get the same angle when
you
go.
Can't. Well, one of the pictures you have is of the block of houses behind Sala Palatului, which is also on the cover of Architectura, the magazine from 1960. And I went there precisely to try and do that. But you can't because of trees and traffic islands and stuff, and it's all got messed up with street furniture. And there's a ton of stuff that wasn't there at the time. So the concept was rather clean and impressive, but the reality now is a bit more cluttered.
Yeah, but the clean concept was also because it was all controlled,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was new. It was how it was.
But some of the images look a bit surreal, right? So they're too arranged, artificial almost,
Yeah,
right?
say that was also true of seaside shots from the UK. I remember certain postcards being sent. If you were to look at the postcards that I got from both from the States and from the UK, I think it was something to do with the way people took photographs in the 60s as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Jonathan. That was lovely.
And we have a new message.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Anna. That's lovely. So, Chantel, would you like to say something now that absolutely every single person said something? But don't feel under pressure. I'll just give you the right, so to speak, to say, but it's fine if you don't want to. That's okay.
I was just thinking if I can just say something for 2
Yeah,
seconds.
of course.
In terms of the seaside and just in terms of the performative element of sort of beach photographs and maybe like not just in the 60s, but like especially in England in terms of Martin Parr and his interest in that kind of seaside photography sort of thing in the 80s and late 70s and 80s and 90s, but in terms of when he started. So there is that as well, just that performative staged nature that comes with these sort of photographs that you just highlighted. I think it's a global thing, sort of thing, that you want to be seen in a particular way or captured in a particular way in that context, as opposed to sort of other places, so I mean, I'm always interested in all these sort of small elements that are overlooked by others, but just because it was brought up.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, if Adelina, if you want to say anything else, otherwise we can probably.
No, just thank you all for your very insightful comments, and it was great, to talk about postcards tonight, and and indeed postcards are maybe they did have some specificity in socialism, right, because of a regime that was had a surveillance aspect, right? And the selection of images was more careful, was more politically, let's say, directed at the political level. But at the same time, there are a lot of aspects that are very common to. So it is how, postcards are useful, right, for tourist promotion, are very important, and they have to send an image, they have to send a message to the potential visitors. That's true everywhere, but there are nuances in the way, this is done and how this is done.
Well, and especially in communist and socialist Romania, I mean, they didn't show the reality at all, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of hotels, the hotels in Mamaia were modern, were new.
No, I mean in terms of like the life, real life, such as
they didn't show images of people queuing for food
exactly,
or
yeah.
other things, or
Yeah.
people crowded in a bus and sometimes traveling
Exactly.
on the stairs of a bus. That's
Yeah.
which are very common in photos, right? So this would be a difference between photos and postcards.
Yeah.
And also in Romania in the 80s, photos became tourists who had a camera with them. Sometimes they at the border they would just open take the film out, and it was all gone, right? So it wasn't forbidden to actually take photos, but when someone crossed the border, some border custom officers would do that. So
also you couldn't take photos in public demonstrations or anything like that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's quite hard.
Political.
That's why photos, like albums of photos from communism, are not so many because of everyday life. I mean, because it was hard to do it. So yeah, Chantal is saying that she's collecting Romanian stamps. That's impressive, and you've got to several hundred. I hope you'll get to thousands. That's really good. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
the meaning of postcard, the postcards are maybe an object, a lost object today, you know, so it's probably an object that will disappear and it will only stay in collections. That's probably sad, you know, but uh, yeah. So maybe discussion like that just shows the potential of postcards as
absolutely, yeah.
Objects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Adelina. I think we can bring the event to an end, but it was a lovely evening and very kind of like amongst friends. So that was brilliant. And yeah, let's think of other things we could do with postcards, especially that I always want to show my collection. Because that's another thing, you know, you want to show it. I mean, what's the point of just keeping it for one person? Yeah.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you. So I'll